You're listening to the Favorite Marriage Podcast, a place where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. Join us as we explore relevant topics and provide practical tools for your marriage toolbox. Here's this week's episode of The Favorite Marriage. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Favorite Marriage Podcast. We are your hosts, Monty and Jeannine Mora, and this podcast is created for couples who really want to take their marriage to the next level. And so we're glad you're tuning in to another episode with us today. We're going to be talking about a topic that we began last week, and the title of the mini-series of the episodes we've been calling it is When Your Vows Are Tested.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that today. But before we talk about like going into the content, want to kind of share something lighthearted with our listeners.
Go
You okay
ahead.
with that?
I don't know what you're sharing, so we'll see.
Yeah. So I've officiated many weddings, and we've participated in many wedding ceremonies as far as attending. And I think my favorite part of the wedding is when the couples are exchanging their vows.
Sure, yeah.
It's one of my favorite parts because, like, for the first time, some couples are hearing the vows for the very first time, and sometimes other couples, they kind of rehearse them and they kind of know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like the impact of those vows, during the ceremony.
Tears
Yeah,
most of the time.
tears. But more than that is some couples, they're really thoughtful when they come up with their vows, or their vows are very meaningful. There's a lot of meat, there's a lot of weight to them. And then we've seen some ceremonies where the vows are like funny, and I don't want to say non-meaningful, but they don't carry as much weight and power as other vows that we've heard with couples. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I know we've met with couples who, like, the night before rehearsal, they hadn't even written their vows yet, and we were like, "You haven't?" We just try to encourage them, like, you really need to just like carve out some time tonight and really just have some heartfelt, dig into your emotions and really commit to these vows, because like you said, they're very important. They're, I believe, one of the most important parts of the wedding ceremony.
Yeah. I came across a quote when it comes to vows, and it was quoted by Timothy Keller, and I'm going to read it for our listeners. But it's a pretty cool quote. He says, "Wedding vows are not a declaration of present love, but a mutually binding promise of a future love." So it speaks futuristically.
Yes.
A wedding should not be primarily a celebration of how loving you feel now, but how you promise to be loving, faithful, and true to the other person in the future, regardless of undulating internal feelings or external circumstances. And I like that because he speaks to the idea that our vows that we speak to each other, they're just not in the moment, like for us right now. They're futuristic because the vows will be tested.
That's really good. What does undulating mean?
Undulating?
That's a new word for me.
Yeah, I don't know.
It sounded good. I mean, the whole quote, we totally get what it means. We understand.
The key is when you pronounce a word that you don't know or understand, just say it in a way that sounds convincing.
And
That's what I did.
confident. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But we get the gist of it, right? Vows are for the moment, but also futuristically.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you love that?
Because love is forever. I mean, when you come together in holy matrimony at the altar with witnesses before God, the witnesses that are sitting in the seats, it should be something that you are standing on for forever. That's the whole point. No one gets married to get divorced. You don't go to the altar with this idea of this is going to last only 5 to 10 years. You know what I mean? That nobody goes to the altar that way. And unfortunately, things happen in life and in marriages where that does fall apart. But the intent at that moment, it's so pure. When you see a bride and a groom just looking into each other's eyes and exchanging those vows, I just love that. It takes you into this, and I don't want to say fairy tale world, but because life is not a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But it's the I think the rawest
Mhm.
their love is
Sure.
in those moments.
Yeah. Vow sayings they're a very intimate moment. I mean,
Mhm.
it's between the husband and the wife, and yeah, there's a sense of intimacy that takes place when the vows are there, but the vows are going to be tested.
Yeah.
There are going to be those seasons where um, handsome little John that you fell in love with is not looking so handsome and kind and gentle. That John guy
Poor John.
can turn into a mean John. You know what I mean, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But how does a couple respond? Like thinking of the vows,
Mhm.
how a couple will respond during those trying and testing moments? Like let's say when there's infidelity,
Mhm.
maybe there's been pornography that's been exposed.
Unfaithfulness in
Maybe there's
different
an
ways, yeah.
yeah. So in those moments, that couples go through, those are like the bigger blocks. But what about when the couples have to face like conflict, communication, unforgiveness,
Mhm.
pride, all these things that really test a marriage? Those are the moments where you have to look at your vows and say, okay, these are the vows I made, these are the vows I committed to,
Yeah.
and now we're in it because this is what we committed to do for one another, right?
Yeah. I can't help but think of the movie The Vow. Um, we're not putting any plugs in it, but the commitment that the husband had to his
Mhm.
wife in their tragic situation. And I think through the whole movie, he just kept committing to like this is what I said I was going to do, and I'm going to do it. And I love that about that story.
Yeah,
You can go watch it if you'd like.
definitely.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive into today's content.
Let's do it.
Last episode, we talked about our personal journey
Mhm.
regarding the vows in sickness and in health. And if you hadn't had a chance to go back, let me just say this again. If you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to that
Yes.
episode, especially if you're a husband and wife that are dealing with health problems, mental health problems.
Mhm.
We give some practical tools on how a couple can really work together and navigate that rough road.
Yeah. Well, we're
Um,
giving the practical tools now, right?
some of them too.
Yeah, we gave a little bit, but most of the podcast, we kind of just shared our hearts.
Yeah.
We just laid it all out there. We felt like it was very important just to share our story. And why do we do that,
Mhm.
Monty? Why do we share our story? Why did we take a whole episode just to have our listeners walk through that journey with
Yeah.
us?
Because we want our listeners to understand that they're not the only one going through what they're going through. When they're going through
Right.
those tough times, sometimes you feel like, man, nobody understands me.
Hmm.
And we're the only ones dealing with this. So we've always committed with our podcast that we want to build a marriage community.
Yes.
And so we want to build a community of married couples who feel like, yeah, we're all in this
Yeah.
together. And so we share because we want to give hope to others. And also we want to be able to let each other know that we're willing to share each other's burdens and let each other know that, man, if you're in it, we're in it, and we're
Hmm.
in it together.
Yeah, what I found so interesting in the specific journey that we have been traveling down with just mental health is when I've had the open door to share with a few people. I just feel in my spirit that I can talk to someone, and there's been a couple people at my job that I've shared with my coworkers, women that have been able to relate with me.
Mm.
And if I would have never shared or talked about it or been willing to open up and say, "Hey, I need help. This is what I'm going through. I'm letting you in on just my life story right now." And it's amazing how willing people are just willing to jump in there with you and say, "Hey, I've
Yeah.
been through that with
They
you."
wanna
I mean,
share their
yeah,
story.
they want to share,
Yeah.
and it's so important that when we when we do that and we share with one another, it really just helps you understand that, I am not in it alone and I don't have to hide. Especially, I mean, we have seen where like mental health is
Mhm.
definitely getting more exposure and is being more embraced by our community, our world. They're identifying that these are real battles and that we are all human. But it used to be just where it was, like taboo, like you didn't want to talk about
Yeah.
mental health. Boy, if you had other physical health problems, then it was like all out there and everybody came to your rescue. But if it was mental health, um, a lot of times people would just kind of just hide in the dark and
Sure.
try to battle it themselves. And I'd have to say that is, I believe, the plan of the enemy, because Satan has come to bring shame on us. Like that's the very first thing he did in the garden with Adam and Eve when they sinned. And he brought the guilt, he brought the shame, and they just wanted to cover and hide. And
Yeah.
we're here to let you know that you don't need to do that.
Mhm.
That we're all human. We all face different struggles, different
Mhm.
battles, and right now that's the battle we're facing. So we felt like it was very important just
Mhm.
to say, "Hey, you are not alone, and we are here, and we'd love
Yeah.
to partner with you in
Yeah.
getting through these struggles, this journey."
Yeah. Do you remember last week that young man that came up to us
Oh yeah.
and he thanked us for the last episode
Hmm.
when we talked about when your vows are tested, and he shared a little bit about his struggle in his marriage, but he seemed to be really impacted by that,
Yeah.
enough for him to come out of his way and to say, "Hey, thank you for sharing that." And again, it
Hmm.
points to that community
Yeah.
and that support system that we want to give
Yeah.
to married couples.
Well, he shared that he had journeyed down, their marriage had journeyed down something similar,
Hmm.
and that he was happy, and he was excited to see that we are talking about it.
Sure.
And I could only imagine he felt that way because maybe he walked his journey alone.
Sounds like it, huh?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we feel like this episode we're going to just share some more stories.
Yeah.
Um, we're taking, this is not content of ours. It's content that we're
Mm.
pulling off of our social media. People have shared because we feel like, again, testimony is it puts Satan under our feet,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
like we mentioned last week, we put him under our feet by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and we just want you
Mm.
to hear different stories, scenarios, and situations.
Yeah, so we're gonna share these stories and we're gonna pull out pieces of golden nuggets,
Mm-hmm.
and then towards the end of the episode, you wanna stay tuned because we're gonna be sharing practical tips regarding these stories that
Yeah,
these couples
just
have
gonna
shared with us.
pull it all together
Yeah,
at the
pull it
end.
all together. Yeah. Okay, so let's do under the banner in sickness and in health because that's where we left
Hmm.
off last
Yeah.
week. Um, we got a response from a very, very sweet young lady and her husband. Her name, are we giving out names?
I believe so
Okay,
because we did share that on the
right.
our social media
Yeah, and that
page.
their names are on the social media. So
Yeah.
Alyssa and Richard. Okay.
Yes. Sweet
So
couple.
very, very sweet couple, very powerful story.
Mhm.
Watch out for Alyssa because she is going to be trying out for America's Got Talent.
Yes,
She
she's
has a beautiful
amazing.
voice and a beautiful story, and
Yes.
we hope she goes all the way and wins that thing. So, man,
Yay,
Alyssa, we're rooting for you. Yeah.
Alyssa!
So she says this. You want to read it or want me to read it?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
So Alyssa says, when Richard was my caregiver and nurse, giving me dialysis treatments every night for 2 years, it wasn't easy. They were definitely hard, very hard times, but we always tried to spend time together when we could, doing things that we liked. He would read a novel with me, or we would have our favorite meal or drink together. Anything that we could share to distract us from what was going on.
Hmm,
That's so important.
that is.
Usually, after we put the kids to bed, we actually went through an entire book series during that time because they love to read together. So I think sharing special moments is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Alyssa has an amazing story, and Alyssa is also blind, and just what she has accomplished in her life through these physical ailments. She leads worship at our church often,
Mm-hmm.
and just to see the support that Richard has brought in their marriage, but also her resilience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such an encouraging story.
Wide in her story, she had a kidney replacement,
Hmm.
a new kidney put in, brand new baby.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you
It
talk
was
about,
premature.
yeah,
It wasn't
premature.
expected to live, and this baby's thriving.
Yeah. So an amazing, amazing story. But I love how Alyssa, shares with her and Richard how they, it says that we would have our favorite drink together, but she said that we would share anything to distract us from what was going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to kind of trick your mind to get past the next moment, to get past the next situation,
Yeah.
and not that they have, and this couple has not pushed aside their problems. They tackle their problems head on together. But sometimes, as a married couple, you just have to agree that, hey, we
Mhm.
realize that there's a very intense health situation here, but for the moment, we're going to push that aside and we're going to focus on reading a book. We're going to go take a walk. We're going to go grab some ice cream, something like
Mhm.
that. But it's about building that unity and that community and that marriage
Yeah.
and really supporting each other.
And being intentional. It sounds like they were very intentional in these things and they committed to them. So reading a whole book series, I mean, that's commitment.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great way to stay committed, is to commit to something where you when you dive into it, you're
Yeah.
kind of in it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like they did that purposefully, and it helped them through.
Yeah.
So I can totally see, like, we had those moments where we just had to get out of the house
Sure.
and go shopping.
Yeah.
Shopping is therapy, by the way.
Yeah. It depends upon who you ask.
So,
But
of course, it's also depends on how much you can do physically.
yeah. Yeah. One more thing about them, and then we'll move on to the next story. Um, for them doing things together, reading a book or sharing a meal, that's a form of intimacy.
Yes, it
That
is.
is a pillar of intimacy that they get to engage in one another.
Mhm.
And that's a way for them to draw closer together, for their
Yeah.
hearts to be knitted, and for them to like, but give me your arm here, for them to like say, we're on the same team, we're in this together,
Yeah.
you know?
The whole one flesh becomes so real.
Yes.
Um, and I love that you mentioned the intimacy part, because intimacy doesn't always have to be sexual.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when couples are going through the sickness and in health, the sickness part, there is the lack of
Hmm.
sexual intimacy because one spouse is not feeling well. Maybe they really cannot engage in that sexual intimacy, or maybe their body is just too weak.
Hmm.
And you have to get creative in how to create the intimacy.
Yeah.
Because intimacy is not just about the act of sex, but it's seeing into each other, like that into me see,
Hmm.
right? So we've said that before. And I think just being able to see into each other's hearts and
Hmm.
minds creates that intimate time.
Yeah. Thank you, Alyssa and Richard, for sharing your
Yes.
story. And we'll be praying for you, and we are rooting for you on America's Got Talent. Yeah. Second story. It's going to be under the vow of for
Well,
better. Worse.
I think you were going to share. Were you going to share about our other friend, but anonymously? Because I think their story has such a powerful.
Yeah. So really quick, we have some dear friends of ours,
Mhm.
and he is the primary caregiver for his wife. His wife
Mhm.
has dementia, and she's been battling this for many, many years. And boy, this guy is my hero. Every time I talk
Yeah.
with him, I tell him, "You are my hero. You embody what a
Yes.
husband should be doing for his wife in this moment." And there's been a lot of tears, a lot of hurt, a
Yeah.
lot of pain. And as I sit with him and visit with him and his wife, man, this guy is just, he's a true embodiment of a man of God, of a godly husband. And he's doing it, and it is hard. I know it's so hard for him, but one of the things we did talk about for him is when you're the primary caregiver and the spouse, what he does to take care of himself.
Yes, that's
You know,
important.
he's been working out, he's been going to the gym. There's outlets that he has to take
Mhm.
care of himself, because if he didn't have any type of self-care, he would have definitely experienced what we call caregiver burnout in our
Mhm.
community. And so, yeah, just an amazing story. Maybe one of these days, with permission, we can share more about their story and actually give names and identities about that.
Yeah. But I love how you mentioned about the part where he is the embodiment of the sickness and in health, because it's not been for months,
Mhm.
it's been for
Years.
years.
Yeah.
And so they never planned that. I mean, he never planned that at the altar. They never saw this coming. And even through it all, he has
Mhm.
committed.
Yeah. Another amazing couple. And these are couples we could just put an S on their chest. Superman, WW, Wonder Woman, or Warrior Woman. I mean, amazing, amazing couples.
Mhm.
Uh, I'll read the next story
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you read the.
Sure.
We're an equal opportunity
For
podcast
sure,
reader.
for
Okay.
sure. And are we
All
going
right.
into for better or for
Yeah.
worse?
So for better for worse.
Oh, I like this story.
So we have this next couple, Lexi and Caleb.
They're our kids.
Our kids.
But
She-
this is such a testimony, because I'm sorry. I know people are like, oh, they're your kids. But no, I mean, that is powerful
Mhm.
because it's a legacy. It's a
Yeah.
generational thing. So,
Yeah.
okay.
To have our kids talk about marriage.
Yes.
And they should submit. We're going to do a podcast one day on when parents have to send off their children to getting married, and we're in like the whole marriage piece thing of children. We'll talk about that, but that's another
Yeah.
episode.
But here's a little bit of
Yeah.
into their story.
So Lexi says, starting this new job, her new job, has been a big life change. I have more responsibilities now than I have ever had before. Caleb has been a big support for me. I literally couldn't function without him. Way to go, boy. He makes me lunch for me every morning. I wonder where he learned that from.
I don't know.
And I have never asked him once to help me with that. Usually laundry is my chore, but taking all this work home puts me behind with that. So Caleb has stepped up and helped me get caught up with the laundry. I think since undergoing this life change, we both have done our best to be gracious towards one
That's
another.
it.
I am personally trying my best to have a change in perspective and focus on what's really important and let go of the things that don't matter. I am still working on this. I would love to hear some concrete tips on how a husband and wife can navigate through these life changes.
Yes. So just a little bit of a backstory. But the reason why we're using this for the better or for worse, because this was actually a for better for them.
Right.
Lexi was looking for a job all summer, and God dropped this position. It was a God thing. It was a God send. And so it was a for better. But even in the for better, there's transitions. There's transitions that need to happen. And if you don't make those transitions together
Mhm.
and unified, even a for better situation could turn for worse.
Yeah.
And they did it, and they're doing it. And so,
Yeah.
you have anything to add to share
I
with
do.
them?
I do. I think what I like about this story and their journey right now is when one spouse is feeling the weight of like home and work pressure or home and work pressure and feel like I just can't take care of some of the things at home that I used to, the other spouse is filling in the gaps.
Yeah,
You
filling in
know,
the gaps.
he's filling in the gaps and he's taking a load, just making lunch in the morning for your spouse. If you have an opportunity to do that, husbands, do that because that little 15 extra minutes does take off a huge load for your spouse, and they can get to grab their lunch. And
Yeah.
if you really want, you can get creative by like writing love notes and things inside the lunch thing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I appreciate when you do that. And when I open up my lunch, it makes me think about you. And every time I open my lunch, I appreciate you. And
Yeah.
so it keeps that appreciation just flowing, and
Yeah.
I don't take that lightly,
Yeah.
even though 15 minutes is 15 minutes.
Yeah. But couples, we need to help absorb
Yes.
the pressure, absorb the weight of the responsibility at home. Whether it's doing laundry or making up the bed or whatever the case may be, just helping each other, working together. And then also she said, we have done our best to be gracious towards one another. Boy, talk about grace in marriage, needing
Yes.
grace with one another in marriage. That is a whole nother episode we can talk about.
Yeah, new positions, new jobs, new babies, new just anything that changes
Yeah.
the flow of the way your home is run. There needs to be grace, and
Yeah.
you need to talk and be open and communicate regularly, and even make sure that you take those times and and say, "Oh, Tuesday communication day, we need to talk about these things." Because sometimes we get so busy
Mhm.
into our routines that we do tend to forget to talk to each other about
Mhm.
the little things that turn into big things.
Yeah.
So, just continuing to create that time management for communication,
Mhm. Yeah.
whether it's once a week, a real good talk, or if it's 10 minutes a day at the end of the
Mhm.
day, however that works for you.
Yeah.
But
That's a
schedule it.
great that's a great segue into the next, statement here for this other couple,
Mhm,
Rosa and Gordy. Um, and you talk about communication, talking. Look how she starts it off with.
mhm,
She says, "We talk."
period.
Period. Made sure that we knew each other, was there for one another always, constantly checking in. She said, "My husband, Gordy, looks at things differently than I do. He always approaches things differently. Perspective, here we go,
Yes.
and can calm my nerves and anxiety."
Yeah.
I love this part because it's all about perspective.
Mhm.
Spouses help each other see their situation from a different perspective,
Yeah.
thus alleviating the pain, the pressure, in this case, nerves and even anxiety.
Because we see each other, I'm pink, you're blue.
Yeah.
We're gonna have different perspectives and ideas and
Mhm.
thoughts.
Integrity Fence is your hometown team for fencing. I'm former Bronco Mark Jackson, and I know you'll score every time with Integrity Fencing. Call today to hear about their new automatic security gates for your business or visit integrityfence.com.
So let's give some practical ways on
Yes.
couples based upon these stories, how couples can implement some things. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the big loud one that we're hearing right now in these couples is open and patient communication.
Mhm.
Okay. So some practical points that were takeaways if you're experiencing these moments where your vows are being tested as a married couple, learn how to create space where you can sit down and have honest, open, and we stress the word patient communication because it takes a lot of patience
It does.
to communicate.
Right.
Okay.
And we experience that, right, Monty? Like we are going down a journey, and if you're in a journey of a health journey, or just a new transitional journey in your life, the future a lot of times is unexpected. You don't know. You don't know what to expect. There's times where you just have to pivot and pivot quick, and things are
Quickly.
happening
Yeah.
in your life, especially in the physical. If you don't know what the next minute is going to bring,
Hmm.
the patience is so important, and so being patient with one another. And I think I just want to say this. I feel like with couples that we've talked to, patience is usually more easily given when there's a physical ailment, because you can actually see it. Your spouse just had surgery, or they have a broken leg, or the physical is so much easier to deal out patience. Where we have seen the mental part, it's a lot harder because you can't see it. You don't know what's
Mm.
going on in your spouse's
It's
mind,
more
the
challenging too.
emotions. It's challenging. It's a trust thing, because
Yeah.
you don't want to look at your spouse like, oh, you're faking it, or that's just, how can you turn so quickly? Your emotional switch, like sometimes we don't understand. When
Hmm.
we don't understand something, we
Hmm.
tend to be less patient with it. So we really want to encourage you to really just lock hearts with your spouse in the area of trusting them,
Yeah.
because when you can do that, then your patience in that situation will come a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely practice patient
Mhm.
communication. Another practical tip they can work on, or couples, us, not you, us, all of us can
All of
work
us
on,
right now.
is making decisions together,
Yes.
joint decisions, meaning coming together as a husband and wife, making mutual agreement and making decisions together.
Mhm.
When your vows are tested, it's very easy and it's very tempting to, as one spouse, to want to go independently and go
Yeah.
rogue and start making decisions on behalf of the marriage where the other spouse is not in agreement with,
Mhm.
and therefore really like adding more pressure. and
It does.
testing to the vows, stressing
Yeah.
out the vows. And so making those decisions together, coming together, again, going back to communication, going back to really processing that decision and
Mhm.
saying together, mutually, we're going to make this together
Yeah.
and we're going to agree on it together. And if it's a good decision, we both win. If it's a bad decision, hey, we're going to learn from this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's never a losing
Well, and
situation.
sometimes, Monty, you don't realize that you have to backtrack and make a decision together until you've made a bad decision,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
we've seen that happen to us this last week, and it's like, oh, I thought I was making a good decision by leaving and going out for a walk and not talking to you.
Yeah.
And it was like you felt like I was stonewalling and rejecting you in
Yeah.
a way, like closing you out. And so it was like, oh, so sometimes that'll happen, but you
Mhm.
have to be willing to recognize when there's been a decision made that wasn't beneficial for both of you,
Sure.
recognize it, and then say, okay, how would we do that again?
Mhm.
Okay, so how would you have wanted me to respond as the conversation we
Mhm.
had? And we had a great conversation. It's like, oh, you would wanted me to do that.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you just got to say it.
yeah, sometimes you just want to say it. So yeah.
Ask it and say it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so make those decisions together.
Yeah. What about maintaining intimacy? So as their vows are being tested, and I was thinking about Richard and Alyssa,
Mhm.
we talked a little bit about that already, but it's important for a married couple to maintain intimacy, emotional intimacy,
Mm.
physical intimacy if you can, spiritual intimacy,
Yeah.
recreational intimacy. I mean, there are so many different levels of how a couple can maintain intimacy during those times. That's so important. I tell you what, when the marriage is being tested, even for us, when we've had our testing moments, there's something about when we get intimate in conversation.
Mhm.
There's something about when we get intimate, even physically,
Mhm.
it just literally changes the dynamic of the situation because it pulls us into one another. And I like what you said, intimacy, in to me, see. That's what it's
Yeah.
about. It's seeing into one another. And so maintaining that during these testing times
Yeah.
is
And
crucial.
and we had to do that mutually. Like you've been so good with just helping me and really just serving me and just trying to help me through this battle where we had to also stop and say, "Hey, what about you?
Mhm.
You know, what about what you're thinking, what your emotional where your emotional battery is right now because
Yeah.
it could be draining and we've seen that like where it's like you have to be mutual with that
Mhm.
reciprocation, like that reciprocity of making sure we're okay,
Yeah.
both of us,
Yeah.
both of you.
Intimacy, into me, see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then self-care and personal
Self-care.
growth.
That's so good. Yeah. That's another practical tip. So encouraging each other as a husband and wife to take time for their physical, mental, and spiritual health, to take that me time,
Mhm.
again, communicating, hey, I just need some Monty time. I need
Yeah.
some Jeannine time, whether it's going and doing something, if it's shop therapy, physical therapy, mental therapy, whatever the case may be, take care of yourself. I think of the
Mhm.
scripture in the word, it says, love one another or love your neighbor as you love yourself. And
Mhm.
so sometimes it's hard to love your neighbor if
Yeah.
you don't have a good perspective of yourself and you don't really like
You're not
love
loving
yourself.
yourself.
Not meaning like you're an idol that you
Right,
worship
right.
yourself, but you just take care of yourself. When
Mhm.
I'm better myself, when I'm a better Monty, I'm a better husband,
Right.
right? And so taking care of that is important. And then there are some cases, Janine, where some couples they need to seek professional help.
Mhm.
And don't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Don't let that word professional help scare you.
Right.
There are those moments in a married couple like us when
Mhm.
we are going through our challenges, we sought a marriage therapist and we sought that out because we felt that's what we needed at that moment.
Yep. Don't play the shame game.
Mhm.
Do not let the enemy be use you as his pawn in the shame game,
Yeah.
because that's his plan. We don't need to be ashamed.
Yeah. Good. Well, there you have it. When your vows are tested in sickness and in health, for richer, for poor, better, for worse. And we hope this information
Yeah.
has really, really been beneficial to you today.
Next week we're going to talk about till death do us
Yeah.
part.
Guys, we have an amazing story, a more recent story of an amazing couple. You're going to want to hear their story next week. Before we sign off, we want to ask our listeners to do a few things. If you
Mhm.
have not had a chance to rate and review our podcast, wherever you listen to our podcast, please take about 30 seconds. If you can give us a star rating, a 5 would be great. But also write a review, because that really does
Yes.
help us in the content world, the social media world,
Mhm.
the operational system world, to where we can help more couples as they search for us on our webpage or online. They'll be able to get this information into their hands. So please rate, review. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can do that as well. All of our audio podcasts are also video podcasts
Yep.
where you get to see us live in action. And so with that,
Mhm.
man, you want to close us out today, Miss Mora?
Well, yes, I would. Because, like always, we pray that you would experience God's favor.
On your forever. Thanks for listening to The Favorite Marriage, where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. If you enjoy this resource, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time on The Favorite Marriage Podcast.